On the day I caught my wife betraying our daughter, I was only supposed to drop off a pie. That's how ordinary the morning began. No warning, no sign. Just me in the car with a warm apple pie and shaking hands. I hadn't planned to visit my son-in-law. I hadn't even spoken to him in a few weeks. But he had just come back from a business trip, and my daughter was still away visiting a friend out of state. Something inside me, some restless weight on my chest, told me to check in on him. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact last time we met, or maybe it was just old age making me suspicious. Either way, I turned the car toward his house instead of going home. I told myself it was nothing, just a quick hello, just an old man filling his time. But when I reached his street, everything changed, because there, parked outside his gate, was my wife's car. At first I thought I was mistaken, that it must be someone else's vehicle that only looked like hers. But no, it was hers. Same scratches on the side mirror I'd told her to fix months ago. Same air freshener hanging from the rear view. And she never mentioned being there. Never told me she was going to visit him. A cold rush moved through me. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. What was she doing at his house? Alone, with our daughter gone. Still, I told myself to be rational. Maybe she stopped by to drop off something. Maybe it was harmless. But deep down, my body already knew what my heart wasn't ready to hear. I parked a few houses away and walked the rest of the way on foot, slowly, carefully, avoiding the gravel path. I knew the layout of his place, knew how to get around the side without being seen. I don't know what pushed me to sneak like that, but something told me this wasn't going to be a visit, this was going to be a reckoning. And as I crept closer to the open patio door, I heard them. Her voice, his voice, laughter, too familiar, too relaxed. And then came the words that would shatter everything. Words that would turn a husband into a stranger, a father into a quiet witness, and a marriage into a lie. But that part of the story, that came after. Friends, let me pause for just a moment. If you're still with me, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And more importantly, has anything like this ever happened in your life? Have you ever discovered something that changed everything? If this story touches you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone. It truly helps us grow this channel and keep telling stories that matter. Now, let's continue. As I got closer to the driveway, something inside me buckled. My hands began to sweat. My mouth dried. And then I saw it. Her car. Parked right there, outside his gate, like it had every right to be. Not moving, not idling, not there for a moment. Parked. Settled in, comfortable. Like it belonged. And suddenly nothing made sense. My wife had told me she was going to visit a friend across town. She'd even kissed my cheek before leaving that morning. Said she'd be back late. Told me not to wait up. And now, here she was, at his house, while my daughter was miles away. No explanation. No excuse that could cover this? Not anymore. The longer I stood there, the heavier the air felt. I could hear the quiet rustle of the wind through the trees, birds chirping somewhere in the distance, and yet everything around me felt wrong. Office, like the world was tilting, and I was the only one who noticed. I stared at that car like it was some kind of evidence in a crime scene, because that's what it was, wasn't it? Proof, not of murder, but of betrayal, of secrets I didn't even know we had. Of trust quietly corroded behind my back while I smiled through dinners and family gatherings, never suspecting that the people I loved most could be lying to my face. The truth started to claw its way in, and it brought pain with it. I thought of my daughter, so in love, so trusting. Just last week she had told me how lucky she was to have a husband who supported her through everything, and how her mother always gave the best advice. She said it with a kind of glowing joy that only comes from believing your world is safe. And now that world was on fire, and she didn't even know it. I wanted to believe there was a reason, a miscommunication, something innocent. But I'd lived long enough to recognize when something stinks. And this reeked. Still I didn't move. Not right away. I just stood there, frozen in place, watching her car, waiting for something, anything to make it all okay again. But nothing came. Just the stillness, the silence, and the slow, unbearable realization that the woman I had shared my life with was hiding something unforgivable. I didn't go to the front door. I couldn't. My body was moving on its own now, like something ancient inside me had taken over, something older than logic, older than trust. It knew something I didn't want to admit yet. My legs carried me silently around the side of the house, past the flower beds I had helped to plant 2 summers ago, past the patio stones I laid with my own hands. The air back there was still and warm, but my chest felt frozen. Then I heard it. At first just voices, muffled, close. Then a laugh. Not just any laugh. Heron! My wife's. That soft, slightly rasped laugh I'd heard 1,000 times. Laughing at my jokes. Laughing with our grandchildren. Laughing on Christmas mornings over coffee. And then his voice followed. Low, easy, relaxed. They were sitting together. Not just talking. Relaxing. As if nothing about this moment was wrong. As if they'd done it before. As if it were normal. My jaw tightened as I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. Each footfall was slow, measured. Every breath felt stolen. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. And then came the words I'll never forget. I didn't catch the beginning, but I heard enough. You really think she suspects anything? No, she answered far too quickly. She trusts me. She always has. The world narrowed. My ears rang. My knees almost buckled. That voice, gentle, sweet, and so terribly cruel, belonged to the woman I had built my life around. And now she was sitting in secret, comforting the man who promised to love our daughter. The man she helped raise like a second son after he entered our family. The same man she once told me reminded her of me in youth. Their laughter drifted again, followed by silence. I couldn't look. I couldn't bear to see what they looked like in that moment. I just stood there, hand on the corner of the wall, holding myself upright. A piece of me cracked open. I thought of the days we spent building this family, the hard years, the sleepless nights, the way we supported our daughter when she doubted herself. How my wife was always the one to hold her after fights, the one to whisper, "You picked a good man. He's solid, just like your father." And now that same woman was sitting in his backyard sipping poison with a smile. There was no confrontation, no rage, just the unbearable quiet of betrayal, the kind that doesn't shout. It whispers, and it whispers in voices you once trusted most. I should have turned away. I should have walked back to my car and left it all behind. Let ignorance cradle me for one more day. But I didn't. I stayed, because something in my soul had already torn open, and now I needed to see how deep the wound went. Their voices drifted through the patio screen, clearer now, and what I heard didn't just sting. It obliterated me. "I can't believe she still hasn't found out," my wife said, calm, amused, not worried, not ashamed. Amused, I stopped breathing. "She's your daughter," he replied, laughing under his breath, like mother, like daughter, blind. And there it was, the crack in the mirror that shattered everything. The moment where love collapsed into betrayal, and the people I trusted became strangers wearing familiar skin. My mind started to spin. I couldn't move. My body felt numb, frozen in place, and yet my heart pounded so violently I thought I might pass out, right there behind the hedge. My knees buckled slightly, but I caught myself. I had to, because what they said next tore through what was left of me. "Once she's pregnant again, she won't question anything," he said, voice full of arrogant certainty. "We'll be in control." Control. That word echoed in my mind like a scream underwater. Control of what? Of who? My daughter? The child they hoped she'd carry? The entire future of a woman too kind to see the wolves at her table? And her own mother, my wife, was part of it. They were manipulating her life like it was some kind of game, planning behind her back, steering her choices, feeding her false love while feasting on her trust. And me? I had been the fool who watched it all, believing our family was solid, safe. I had shared a bed for over 3 decades with a woman who could look me in the eyes and lie without a flicker of guilt. A woman who had helped raise our daughter to believe in goodness and honesty, only to betray every lesson she once preached. She wasn't just keeping a secret, she was plotting. And suddenly, Everything from the past few months made sense. The late-night texts she brushed off. The excuses that never quite added up. The way my son-in-law stopped calling me Dad, switching to my first name like something between us had shifted. It had shifted. I just didn't see it. I felt sick. A weight pressed against my chest, heavy and cruel. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, but seeps into your bones until you wonder if you'll ever feel clean again. The people I had built my life around, the people I would have died for, were stabbing my daughter in the back while smiling to her face. And for what? Power? Control? Some twisted sense of superiority? I didn't know. All I knew was that something sacred had died in that garden, and I was the only witness. No one else knew what I knew, not yet, but the storm was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to be silent. I stood there like a ghost, caught between two worlds, the one I thought I lived in, and the one I had just uncovered. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. My body had abandoned me, frozen in place like it knew if I moved, if I took even one step, everything would collapse. My wife, the woman who held my hand at our daughter's birth, who wept when we gave her away on her wedding day, who held our granddaughter for the first time and whispered, "This is what love looks like." She was there, behind that screen door, laughing with the man who had vowed to cherish our daughter, conspiring with him, mocking the very life we helped build, tearing it apart with careful smiles and soft voices. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd go deaf from the sound of it, but I still heard everything, every low-toned whisper, every mocking chuckle, every reminder that I was the only one standing outside the lie, alone. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theater. A performance so well rehearsed, it made me sick. They played their roles beautifully. The loving mother, the devoted husband. And my daughter? She was the puppet, strung along with kind words and false promises. Her future manipulated like a script they wrote in secret. I thought of all the times I defended him. When others raised an eyebrow at his ambition, his smugness, his charm that felt too slick, I said, "He's just young. He'll learn." When our daughter cried after their first real fight and said he made her feel small, I told her, "All couples go through it. Just talk to him." Talk to him. God, how I wish I could go back and unsay every word I used to silence her doubts. But the worst part, the part that will haunt me longer than any of their words, was realizing that this wasn't new. This didn't begin last week or even last month. It was a rot that had been growing quietly for years. I just never looked close enough to see it. I trusted too much, believed too deeply, held on to the idea of family like it was a shield, and it had become a blindfold. Still, I couldn't move, because if I walked away now, it would feel like I had given them permission. And if I stormed in, demanded answers, screamed like the father I felt burning inside me, I would lose the one thing that mattered most, my daughter's trust. She had to hear it on her own, see it, feel it. Not because I told her, but because the truth always finds a way. And I would be there when it did, not to save her, not to speak for her, but to catch her when the truth tore the ground out from under her feet. I looked up toward the sky as if maybe God himself could give me a reason not to fall apart. But all I saw was sunlight filtering through branches and the blur of tears I hadn't realized were falling. I wiped my face slowly, quietly, like it mattered, because somewhere deep down, something in me was changing. The man who stood by silently while others controlled the story was gone. I had seen too much, heard too much, felt too much, and now I knew this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about justice, and it was coming. I stumbled back to the car as if walking through a fog, my legs heavy and unsteady. The steering wheel felt cold under my trembling hands, and for a moment I wondered if I'd been drugged. How else could my mind have betrayed me into this nightmare? I slid behind the wheel, barely aware of the engine's growl coming to life, and then we were moving. I don't remember shifting gears or turning onto the road. It was all white noise and blurred headlights, as if the world had become a watercolor painting I was tearing my way through. With each passing mile, a fresh stab of grief tore through me. The road stretched out endlessly, but every landmark was haunted by ghosts of better days. There, under the yellow glow of a street lamp, was where my daughter learned to ride her bike, her laughter echoing against the pavement. A little further on, the bakery where my wife and I used to steal cinnamon buns on Sunday mornings, whispering secrets no one else would hear. Even the humblest of curbside mailboxes reminded me of birthday cards and love letters, tokens of trust, now rendered meaningless. My heart felt like a house whose windows had been shattered by a storm. I could see the sky, yes, but the roof had caved in and nothing inside was safe. I thought of the miles I'd trekked in my life, the journeys of love and hardship that had led me here, to this cold, lonely drive in the middle of nowhere. Memories I once cherished now felt like strangers I no longer recognized. Every melody on the radio, every scent of pine drifting through the open window, carried the weight of deception. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched like hours. My chest heaved with silent sobs I couldn't fully release, as though they might choke me if I dared. My knuckles whitened with the effort of gripping the wheel, the only thing anchoring me to reality. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists against the dashboard, to demand that the world make sense again, but my voice had fled, leaving only a hollow ache. Finally, I pulled into my driveway, though I couldn't tell you how I knew it was mine. The car came to a stop, and the engine's thrum faded into the night. I sat there a long moment, staring at the door, trying to gather the scattered pieces of my will. Every instinct begged me to run back inside, to wake my wife and tear from her the truth, or at least force her to see what she had done. But I stayed put, because somehow, under all that rage and heartbreak, a single thought shone through. My daughter deserved to hear this from me, but on her own terms, not as part of someone else's twisted plan. So I shut off the engine and sat in darkness, letting the silence settle around me. The drive had ended, but the journey, her journey, our journey, was only just beginning, and I would be ready for when she needed me most. When I stepped through the front door, the house felt both the same and utterly alien. She stood in the warm glow of the hallway light, her smile soft, welcoming, as if nothing had changed, as if the world still revolved around the gentle rhythm she dictated. My heart thundered against my ribs, each beat demanding I tear off that porcelain mask and reveal the truth I carried like a blade. But I simply nodded when she asked about my walk, the single word "good" lodged in my throat, impossible to speak. The kettle hissed in the kitchen, sending a curl of steam upward, and for a moment I considered smashing it against the tile floor. Anything to shatter the suffocating silence. Instead, I placed my coat on the rack, each motion deliberate, measured. I could almost feel her watching me, gauging my mood, confident that her performance was flawless. How do you confront someone who has woven their deceit into every fiber of your shared life, who wears betrayal like a second skin and still expects you to believe in fairy tales? I moved through the rooms in a daze, our wedding photo on the mantel, the quilt we made together draped over the sofa, the mug she always set beside mine in the morning. All reminders that we once built something sacred. Now they felt like relics in a museum of lies. My hands trembled as I reached for a glass, the cold surface grounding me for a heartbeat. I stared at my reflection in the window, the streetlights casting my gaunt face in harsh relief. She drifted behind me, humming a tune I used to adore, a lullaby I once sang to our daughter. But the melody twisted in my ears now, a cruel echo of what we had lost. And in that quiet, before the storm I knew was coming, I realized the hardest part wasn't exposing her truth. It was the moment after, when nothing could ever go back to the way it was. I found her in the sunlit kitchen, her hair catching the morning light like spun gold. She was humming softly as she sliced fruit, her cheeks glowing with that unmistakable radiance of someone in love, someone so certain of her happiness she seemed to float. She spun around when she saw me, eyes bright and warm, those same eyes that once sought my approval when she learned to walk, that welled with tears when I walked her down the aisle. Now they shone with hope, trust, blissful ignorance of the storm gathering just beyond the horizon. "Dad!" she cried, pulling me into a hug that felt too tight, as if she was trying to fuse us together against the world. She told me how kind he'd been on their trip, how he surprised her with breakfast in bed, how he held her hand while she spoke about her dreams for their next child. She praised her mother for her wise counsel, how Mom had encouraged her to follow her heart, to trust her instincts, to lean on her husband whenever things got hard. My chest twisted with every word. Each sentence was another nail driven into the coffin of the life I once knew. My daughter's joy was a blade against my ribs, but I couldn't let her see the blood. So I smiled. I laughed at her stories, reached across the counter to squeeze her shoulder, told her how proud I was of the life she and her husband were building. I watched the genuine spark in her eyes, the effortless way she believed in the love and loyalty of the two people she adored most in the world. How could I rip that away? How could I shatter that fragile bubble of trust with the truth I carried? I thought of her wedding day, how she looked at her mother with such gratitude, how she thanked me for raising them both to believe in good. She had inherited her mother's kindness and her mother's blind faith. A lump rose in my throat as I realized how deep their lie ran, how perfectly they'd woven it into my daughter's world. I lingered there as long as I could, savoring her laughter, memorizing the tilt of her head, the way her smile reached her eyes. Every second was a victory for them. Another moment the clock ticked down to the reckoning I couldn't yet bring myself to deliver, because telling her would break us both. When I finally left, kissed her forehead, whispered "I love you," she beamed up at me, her hand warm in mine. I turned away before she could see the tears I dared not shed in front of her, and walked out into the pale morning light. Her hope stayed with me, a fragile lantern in the darkness of what I had uncovered. And as I drove away, I promised myself that I would protect that light, that trust, as long as I could, until the moment came when she needed to know that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who cut us the deepest. I couldn't bring myself to sit her down and accuse the two people she loved most of treachery. She would recoil, deny, protect them. Her world was woven so tightly with their words and their lies that any direct assault would collapse everything, and she still had no inkling of the betrayal waiting for her. Instead, I decided on a gentler path, one threaded with love and precaution. The next morning, over coffee, I broached the idea lightly, as though it were my own concern for her comfort and safety. "Why not install a baby monitor early?" I suggested, my voice soft. "One with a camera, just to test the equipment. Make sure the angle's right when the baby comes." Her face lit up at the thought. Practical, caring, trusting. She thanked me, hugged me, called me the world's best dad. I smiled and nodded, masking the storm inside. In reality, I was planting a seed, a tiny, seemingly innocent device that would become the silent witness to their deceit. I volunteered to handle the installation myself, offering to bring over the equipment and set it up while she took a nap after lunch. She agreed without hesitation, her eyes shining with gratitude. That afternoon, I arrived with the sleek little camera, wires, and instructions. He was in the garage working on his car. She was upstairs, humming a lullaby in preparation for motherhood. I worked with quiet precision, mounting the monitor where it would face the baby's crib, but also catch the adjoining room, where I knew their clandestine meetings often began. My hands trembled as I secured the cables, but my heart felt strangely calm, steeled by the purpose of protecting my daughter. Every click of a screw felt like a promise that soon the truth would no longer be a whisper behind a screen, but a broadcast she couldn't ignore. By the time I finished, the sun was dipping low, painting the walls in gold. I wiped my brow, checked the angle on the small screen, and smiled to myself. The monitor sat there innocently, like a guardian angel turned spy, waiting to capture the moments my daughter wasn't meant to see. I left them that evening, walking away with a simple reassurance. Let me know if anything goes wrong. While inside, I carried the weight of what was to come. The plan was set. Love would be my shield, and the monitor would be the catalyst. Soon the voices she trusted would betray themselves, and the truth would no longer be mine to withhold. It would belong to her, delivered straight from the lips of the two people she believed in most. And in that revelation, I prayed she would find the justice and freedom she deserved. She. Chapter 10. The Day the House Spoke. When her call came, I was in my study, pretending to sort through old bills, the afternoon sun slanting across the desk. The moment I heard her voice, fragile, trembling, it felt as though the walls themselves leaned in to listen. "Dad." "Mom was here today," she whispered, each word weighed down by shock. My heart slammed against my chest. I felt the room grow colder, the air stiff and brittle. I rose slowly, as if moving through water, and pressed my back against the doorframe. I had waited for this moment, yet now that it was here, I feared it more than anything. "She didn't know the camera was on," she continued, voice breaking. "I heard everything." Silence stretched between us like a widening chasm. I could almost hear the creak of floorboards in her home, the distant hum of appliances, and then the voices. My wife's silky tone, his low laugh, their words replaying in my mind like sharpened glass. I closed my eyes and drew in a shuddering breath. The weight of betrayal pressed against my lungs, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Tell me what you heard," I said softly. Her next words tore at me. She was telling him how much control they'd have once I was pregnant again, how I'd never suspect a thing. I could almost see her standing there, alone, vulnerable, realizing that the sanctuary she had called home was built on lies. Why would she do this to me? My daughter's question echoed through the line, raw and heartbreaking. Tears blurred my vision as I leaned against the doorframe, bracing myself. I remembered the first time she called me Dad, small and hesitant, and how I had lifted her into my arms. Now she faced a different truth, that her own mother saw her not as a child to protect, but as a pawn in someone else's game. "I don't know," I whispered, voice thick with sorrow. But I did know. I knew that the woman who kissed me goodnight, who comforted our granddaughter, had turned her back on the daughter she once vowed to protect. I knew that my son-in-law, the man I once trusted like a son, had mocked our daughter's innocence for his own gain. I heard her inhale as though gathering courage from the shattered pieces around her. "Dad, what do I do?" I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, because in that moment there were no easy answers. There was only the fracture in our family, the house that had once held laughter, now echoing with cold confession. "I'll come over," I said finally, voice steady despite the storm inside. "We'll face this together." And as I hung up, I felt the walls breathe out, no longer hushed by secrets, but alive with the promise of truth. The house had spoken, and now, at last, we would answer. She arrived just after dusk, her silhouette framed by the golden porch light, fragile, trembling, like a wounded bird seeking refuge. The moment the door closed behind her, she sank to the floor, shoulders shaking with silent sobs that seemed endless. I knelt beside her, my arms instinctively wrapping around her small frame. She buried her face in my chest, and I could feel every tear soaking into my shirt, each one a testament to the trust that had been ripped away. "She manipulated me," she whispered through ragged breaths. "She told me I was overreacting when I questioned him, said I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand how much he loved me." Her voice cracked as she fought for each word. "She gaslit me, Dad, made me doubt my own mind." I held her tighter. Every fiber of my being ached with guilt for not seeing it sooner, for letting her walk blind into their trap. "You're not crazy," I told her, pressing my cheek to her hair. "You did exactly what any loving daughter would do. You trusted the people who should have loved you back." She looked up, her eyes swollen and rimmed in red, but burning with raw hurt and newfound clarity. "And now I know why," she said, voice strong despite the tears. "She wanted to control me, shape my life for her own ends, use me like a puppet. I swallowed hard, anger and sorrow colliding in my chest. The same mother who once rocked me to sleep had learned to craft lies so carefully that my own daughter nearly lost herself to them. My heart shattered all over again at the thought. She rose slowly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I feel so stupid," she murmured. "So betrayed." "Don't," I said firmly, helping her to her feet. "You're not stupid. You're the bravest person I know. It takes incredible strength to see the truth once it's been hidden in plain sight." She took a shaky breath, steadied by the conviction in my voice. Together we walked toward the living room, where the soft glow of a single lamp cast long shadows. There I laid out the plan I'd crafted, the evidence from the baby monitor, the recordings of their whispers, every word that had been meant to stay secret. Her lips parted in a silent gasp as the reality settled over her like a heavy cloak. But I could see something else there too, spark, a fierce glimmer of justice awakened by the pain. And in that moment, as father and daughter stood side by side, I knew this wasn't just the breaking of trust. It was the forging of something stronger, the unbreakable bond between us, born in truth and tempered by betrayal. The storm had hit, but we would weather it together. We pulled into her driveway just as dawn was breaking, the sky bruised with purple and gold. My daughter's jaw was set, her shoulders squared beneath the soft fabric of her blouse. Side by side, we walked up the familiar path. Every crack in the slate stones, every rose bush we once tended together, now felt charged with the weight of what was to come. She paused at the front door, her hand hovering over the knob. I could see the resolve in her eyes, the way her breath steadied. With a single nod, we crossed the threshold together, two warriors stepping into the heart of the betrayal. Inside, the air was thick with mourning silence. Her husband sat at the kitchen table, eyes widening when he saw us. My wife hovered near the stove, turning slowly as though she'd been caught mid-performance. Their confident masks slipped in that instant, revealing the fear beneath. My daughter didn't hesitate. She advanced to the center of the room, voice low but carrying. "You lied to me," she said. The words landed like stones, tumbling through the quiet. "You used me." He opened his mouth, stammered for a reply, but she cut him off with a glance so fierce it felt like lightning. "And now," she continued, "I'm done." He sagged in his chair, the bravado drained from his posture. I watched him shrink under her gaze, the same man who once seemed so untouchable. Then she turned to her mother. My wife stood by the counter, hands trembling around a coffee mug. Our daughter's voice softened only in rhythm, not in power. "You betrayed your own blood. You're no longer welcome in my life." My wife's face went pale, the years of practiced composure evaporating in that moment. Her eyes pleaded, but there was no forgiveness to be found. Not today. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I placed a hand on my daughter's shoulder, steady, protective. Together we turned and left the room, her hand slipping into mine. Each step toward the door echoed in the hollow house, carrying away the last ghosts of what we once were. As we stepped into the bright morning air, she exhaled, a trembling breath that was both relief and mourning. I squeezed her hand, and, without words, we began the journey of rebuilding a life where truth would be the foundation, not betrayal. The confrontation was over, but the path ahead, toward healing, toward justice, was only just beginning. When we left her house that morning, a hollow weight settled over me. The rooms where our laughter once echoed back at us now stood empty, as if the very walls recoiled from the memories they held. By evening, her suitcase stood by the front door, my wife's life packed into a single black bag. She moved out with quiet efficiency, as though trying to erase every trace of the life we'd built together. Inside those silent rooms, the photographs felt like ghosts. Our wedding portrait, children's drawings taped to the fridge, the quilt we stitched for our daughter's first birthday. Each image stabbed at me with what could have been. I walked through the empty hallways at dusk, the floor creaking underfoot, and every step reminded me that home no longer meant safety or love. Meanwhile, the paperwork sat on my desk, the divorce filing she trusted me to submit. My daughter had torn the final pages from her marriage certificate and handed them to the court, her hands steady even as tears marked the pages. It was the justice she needed, the legal seal on her freedom, yet the act felt like a funeral for a future that never truly existed. Late that night, I found myself standing in what used to be our bedroom. The sheets were neatly folded, the bed made as if waiting for two, but only one pillow remained. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of a neighbor's air conditioner. I closed my eyes and breathed in the emptiness, feeling years of love and trust collapse into a single aching moment. Finally, I spoke the words that had been buried under decades of compromise and unspoken fears. My voice was low, but carried every ounce of heartbreak and anger I'd hidden. I told them both, her in my mind as I stood alone in that room, and him in the memory of his smug laughter behind the patio screen, that they had lost everything the moment they tried to control my daughter's life. The words echoed back, a quiet thunder in the darkness, and though no one was there to hear them, I felt a release, an exhale so deep it shook me to my core. The love that once lived here was gone, replaced by a stillness so profound it seemed to hum with possibility. In that silence, I realized that sometimes home isn't a place filled with walls and pictures, but the truth we carry in our hearts. And now, even as the echoes of betrayal faded, a new quiet settled in, a silence of clarity, where love could one day be rebuilt on solid ground, unafraid of lies. There was no need for a gavel to fall or a judge to pronounce judgment. Our justice came silently in the steady reclamation of what mattered most, our dignity, our bonds, and the safety of the next generation. My daughter began therapy the week after the confrontation. I remember driving her to the first session, her hand on mine, our car filled with a shared resolve. She stepped out with determination shining in her eyes, ready to untangle the knots of betrayal and rebuild her sense of self. Each appointment afterward became her battleground, every small victory a testament to her strength. I watched her grow in those quiet rooms, her shoulders straightening, her voice finding clarity again. At home, her son thrived in the newfound peace. He chased sunlight across the yard, his laughter echoing through open windows, as if heralding a brighter tomorrow. He remained blissfully unaware of the darkness we'd pulled him out of, the secret plans and whispered lies that might have stolen his childhood. Instead, he soaked in the safety we painstakingly restored, secure in the arms of a mother who would never let him down. And what of the two who had believed themselves untouchable? They sat in separate silences, each confronted by the full weight of their choices. My wife, once the anchor of our family, now faced her own quiet reckoning, alone in an apartment where her footsteps no longer carried warmth. She had built a fortress of deception, only to find herself locked inside. My son-in-law remained in that house we once called home, the walls thick with the echoes of broken trust. He could no longer command the narrative, no longer shape our daughter's world. His silence was loud in its own way, a testimony to the power he had wielded and the emptiness it left behind. Meanwhile, we moved forward, my daughter, her son, and I, together. We didn't need plaques or headlines to validate our victory. Our healing spoke for itself in everyday moments, bedtime stories told with genuine smiles, breakfasts shared without fear of hidden agendas, and the simple comfort of knowing we had each other's backs. In that quiet triumph, justice was done. Not with pomp or public spectacle, but through the unbreakable bonds of a family choosing truth over lies, love over manipulation, and freedom over control. And as our laughter once more filled rooms that had known only silence, we discovered that the strongest justice is often the one that arrives softly, then roars in the beating hearts of those it protects. Months later, I found myself standing beside her in the late afternoon light, the yard bathed in gold and the gentle hum of summer breeze weaving through the trees. My daughter's hand slipped into mine, calloused from years of motherhood, yet soft with newly reclaimed strength, and she squeezed gently. Her eyes, once red from tears and anger, now held a calm glow. "Thank you for not yelling," she whispered, voice thick with gratitude, "for just letting the truth speak." I looked at her, this woman I'd watched grow from a hopeful girl into someone unbreakable. She was strong now, tempered by pain and polished by honesty, her wisdom shining brighter than any advice I could have ever given. "You did the brave part," I told her softly, my own heart swelling with pride and relief. I realized then that protecting her wasn't about shielding her from pain. It was about giving her the space to face it and emerge whole. We stood there in companionable silence, her son's laughter rippling across the lawn as he chased a stray butterfly, unaware of the storms we'd weathered. In that moment, the world felt right again. The wounds of betrayal had scarred over, leaving behind a testament to the power of truth. And as I drew a deep breath of that peaceful summer air, I felt it settle into my bones, steady, healing, and absolute. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by whispers behind closed doors or the weight of secrets. Instead, I stood in the open, surrounded by the people I loved most, knowing that nothing could ever shatter us again. Because truth, though painful, had finally come home, and with it, a peace more profound than any I'd ever known.